Say thank you. I put it in yesterday, the day before, something like that. How was your Thanksgiving?
Good, how about you? So maybe, I don't know, because we had a lot of testing. Oh, good, Bridget are on the phone, good.
Yes. Thank you for keeping track of me. I
why don't we wait just a minute or two for latecomers?
That should be our biggest problem, that the freeway, right?
How are you?
I'll get up here. Good morning. Oh, okay, that's interesting. I'm trying to think, connect Russia with Scotland.
Well,
You'll put it together.
the wonderful thing about teaching the history of Jews in one country is that it always brings in history from the world
Yeah,
because they had to get there from a certain
right.
place. And I think it's really beneficial for us to review quickly
Yeah,
world history as it affects,
right.
because people, it's hard to remember at
It's
our
true
age
of all history.
various.
You know, the first time I really learned about cause and effect was in a music appreciation class. And they talked about the influence of the world politics and how that affected the music. And how music affected the art, painting arts. My favorite fact is what caused the Impressionist movement? What invention caused the Impressionist movement? The camera.
Oh, how interesting.
Yes, I love things like that. Camera, because suddenly people could take pictures, and they had to put something into the picture that could not be seen in a
That makes
camera.
perfect sense.
Yeah, cause and effect.
Susie, are we good?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Okay, we'll wait 30 more seconds, 1 minute, whatever. Not yet. Not yet. Very nice. Thank you. So I just wanted to, before we start, I just wanted to very quickly tell you about a interesting story to me anyway, and you may find it interesting. So not this last weekend, but the weekend before, the one before Thanksgiving, I was at a biblical scholars conference in San Diego. So one of my friends in the doctoral program where I am right now recommended, he said, Mark, you should be going to these conferences and you should be presenting papers and all this kind of stuff. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll give it a shot and see what it's about. Usually, they're all over the United States, and this one happened to be in San Diego. I said, okay, this is an easy one for me to try out because it's only 2 hours away. So I went down there, and they have many, they had the convention center, and every room was filled with different lectures on various subjects. And I was very excited because the first night that I got there, they had a lecture on the relations between the southern kingdom of Judah and the northern kingdom of Israel, and that's like, ooh, that's interesting. Okay, that was great. That's right up my alley. The second day, they had an interesting title. It was The Theology of the Hebrew Bible. I thought, ooh, this is really good. What I didn't do was pay close enough attention to who the lecturers were and what colleges they were coming from. Anyway, so I sat in, and the first lady who came, they were talking about lament in various books, in Ecclesiastes and in Lamentations. And the first lady who stood up, she presented a scholarly paper, and she opened her mouth and she said, well, in the book of Kohelet, and I was like, it's Kohelet in our tradition. Kohelet. In Hebrew it's called a segolate. Whenever it has a s sound, the first always takes precedence. So the word for boy in Hebrew, yeled, for son, shemesh. Anytime you have it's always the first that takes the accent. And Kohelet, normally a three-syllable word, normally would, like Avraham, would always be on the third syllable in Hebrew, except when it's a segolate, like the word for kingdom, mamlechet. Anyway, so I like cringed when I heard that. She said it 13 more times throughout her lecture. And there was a Jewish lady behind me, and she asked a question, and she goes, well, I'm really glad that you're talking about Kohelet. And but she didn't get it. Completely oblivious. And she went on to mispronounce. Anyway, the next guy who stood up says, and he gave us an analysis, and he pulls out the Hebrew, and he goes, and here, you see the Hebrew word here, chesed, not chesed, chesed. Again, a problem with the segolate. And then the final guy that I had really gone to see, who was lecturing on Jeremiah, says, and I want to focus here on the Hebrew word shaver. No, it's shever. And I pointed it out to him afterwards, and he said, oh, yeah, I should have paid more attention to the pronunciation. And I'm like, no, you obviously can't work in Hebrew. And then what was really nice was this. I attended the lecture right after that with 4 real Hebrew scholars. One from Israel had flown out, and they were wonderful. And they were specifically talking about how Christian scholars, New Testament scholars, learn a little bit of Hebrew and think they know a lot of Hebrew and the ability to work with our texts. And truth be told, there are a number of really brilliant New Testament Christian scholars. They're very clearly able to work with Jewish texts, no question about it. But these weren't, and it was really annoying. It's called the Society for Biblical Literature. It's a huge organization. I'm getting 2 papers ready to submit for presentation, and we'll see if they pick it up. I'll fly out to Boston next year and present at least one of them. There were all kinds of Jewish clergy there. We were very much underrepresented. I'm looking for kippot, and it's like, there's one. Oh no, that's a hat. No. Oh, good, there is one. Yeah. So, San Diego. No, I think they are aware. I think what they feel is, as long as they have a little bit of facility to work with the original language, then they don't really have to spend a lot more time to learn it fully. If I were going to be a New Testament Christian scripture scholar, if I didn't know Greek, Koine Greek, what kind of scholar can I call myself? That's the original language this stuff was written in. You can't work from you got to work from the original. That's what scholars do. And these people were passing themselves off as scholarly, and it's like, no, no. It's embarrassing. Okay. All right. So today I want to jump into, let's go to the British Isles and talk about Scotland, the Jews of Scotland. And I have some other names up here. And the reason for that is one of the reasons I love teaching about Jews of a specific country is that no matter where we go, what country we're in, we have to bring in world history because the Jews got there from somehow. And a number of situations repeat themselves over and over and over again, and we have parallels to them in our country's history. And so I think it's always helpful for us to review, oh, when did that happen with us? Oh, how did that get to the... So that's why okay. Yes. You had Scottish cousins? And they spoke with a Scottish accent? Jewish Scottish. Wow. That's a heck of a... How you don't know how they got there? So let's talk about how they probably got there. Do you know where they were from originally?
No. Well, my folks were from Poland.
Poland. Okay. Well, I got you covered then. You have a full-blown Scottish member of Adat Ariel. David Gruber. He speaks with a brogue, yes. Oh, wonderful. Great character. Wonderful. Say again? He came here when he was 25. All right. So the first sort of corroboration that we can get for Jews in Scotland comes from the 17th century. 17th century is the 1600s, right? And they were Ashkenazic Jews, and they lived first in Edinburgh, which is the capital of Scotland, and then Jews moved westward to Glasgow. So you see Edinburgh here, and then to the coast on Glasgow. And they began moving to Glasgow in bigger numbers in the 19th century. So it was Edinburgh for a long time. In 2011, the census in 2011 had 5,887 Jews in Scotland, and they made up 0.01, 1/100th of the population of Scotland. All right, so we go now back to the year 1180, and the Bishop of Glasgow, there is a note saying he forbade borrowing from Jewish lenders. So they don't have any specific information, but clearly there was some kind of something where there were some Jews who were moneylenders, which we know was a thing in the Middle Ages, clearly. Why was it a thing in the Middle Ages for Jews to lend money?
Christian law didn't permit Christians to lend money because of usury laws.
So the Christian laws did not allow Christians to lend money because of usury laws. Usury meaning excessive interest. Okay, why was that so? Why didn't the Christians allow usury? Because it's in the Bible. That is the correct answer. The longer explanation is Christians saw themselves as the new Israel. Remember the New Testament? So they saw themselves as the new chosen people. Jewish law forbids Jews to charge excessive interest from other Jews. Therefore, Christians said, we cannot charge excessive interest from other Christians. But the Jews can. So, so Jews were excluded from the guilds. They couldn't work in many fields. One of the places where they did excel was in banking and money lending. So that's how they got there. Okay. Why did those Jews come to Scotland? They came for trade because wool was the main export from Scotland. And of course, Jews have always been in the shmata business, wool and fabrics and weaving and textiles. So that is probably why they came over. There's no direct evidence for it, but it sounds very, very logical. Yes, Zisel.
Yeah, I didn't have my whiskey this morning. That's what happens. Okay. Oh, thank you. I understand that another reason why the Jews were into the money lending business and commercial transactions and all of that is because traditionally, throughout the Galut, Jews were in communications with each other, and Jews developed a mercantile style of dealing with other Jews through letters of credit and all of these banking things that really originated with the Jews. And that gave them a good foothold in the mercantile life of the countries that they lived.
That's absolutely correct. So remember, once Islam comes on the scene in 600 CE, Islam takes over large portions of what we now call the Middle East. Europe was Christian. Christian bankers would refuse to deal with Muslim bankers and vice versa. So they needed someone who could talk to each other. Well, Jews found themselves under Christian rule in Europe, and they found themselves under Islamic rule in the Middle East. And Jews in the Middle East could talk to Jews in Europe because they had a common language, Hebrew. They weren't speaking Hebrew the way Israelis are speaking Hebrew today, but they could communicate in terms of weights and measures and banking and things like that. So that set up an ability with finances that carried them through the Middle Ages. The first Jew recorded who comes to Scotland, his name was David Brown. Good Jewish name, I guess. David Brown. Maybe they're descendants. Maybe. You never know. And he filled out an application to reside in 1691. Where was he from? I don't know. And so 1691, the beginning of Jews coming to Scotland, really, in the post-industrialization of Europe, 1707-ish, because what had happened previously, as we know, there were anti-Jewish laws from Great Britain. When were Jews expelled from Great Britain? Good. 1290. Very good. So we know Jews were, the big one that we all know, Jews were expelled from Spain in 1492. But Jews had already been expelled from England and as well France under Philip the Fair. They were expelled from England in 1290. How did they get back to England? because Oliver Cromwell brings them back. He readmits them in 1656. So 1290, basically 1300 to 1656, 366 years, Jews are expelled from England.
He had noticed what was happening in Holland, and that the Jews were in Holland and were helping the economy of Holland, and wanted that for England.
Very good, very good. So, this gives us a moment to move to this side. Who's Oliver Cromwell? It's a name that we should know. He's one of the most important figures in British history.
If I remember my history right, they killed off Charles I, and somebody had to take over the government, and I think he was he next?
Very good. Very good. Yes. Hang on. So Charles I is king of England, Ireland, and Scotland. And there is a war, there are actually 3 wars, between the various countries, pitting what we call the royalists against the parliamentarists. The royalists basically were those supporting the king. The parliamentarians were supporting the government because the king wanted to have excess power. He wanted political and religious bodies, churches, and the government to be subordinate to the king. He wanted to basically be a dictator. And as well, you had England and you had Scotland, which were Protestant, and you had Ireland, which was at the time Catholic. So you had religious problems and you had political problems. And what happens is Charles I is overthrown and executed. Who takes over it correctly, Lana points out? Oliver Cromwell. And he becomes what we call the Lord Protector. And he was power hungry too. Yes. He basically is the caretaker of the government until Charles I's oldest son, Charles II, becomes king. So he takes over. All right. And that's in 1660. Okay. Medical students, at that time, in 1656, did not have to take a religious oath. In other words, they didn't have to pledge themselves to any religious denomination. So we have the first Jew, Joseph Hart Myers, and he was born in New York. He's the first Jewish medical student at the University of Edinburgh in 1779. And then the first medical student at the University of Glasgow was Levi Myers in 1787. The first congregation in Scotland was in 1817 in Edinburgh, and at that time there were 20 families. And in Glasgow, it was in 1821, the first congregation in Glasgow. Most new Jews were Dutch or German merchants who saw opportunities in Scottish cities. So remember that for a second, because that's going to change in a minute. They were Dutch or German merchants. So they were from Western and Mid and Central Europe. Western and Central Europe were thriving, industrial. There was wealth. There was education. And so they came from a good place. They came from wealth. They came from education. In 1878, Hannah de Rothschild, at the time she was the wealthiest woman in Britain as a Rothschild, she married Scottish aristocrat Archibald Primrose, the 5th Earl of Rosebery. Wow. And it was interesting because at that time in history there was anti-Semitism. And there was a lot of anti-Semitism. So not only is she Jewish, but she marries outside the faith, clearly. They have 4 children. And interestingly enough, their son Harry would become the Secretary of State for Winston Churchill in 1945. So now we get the second wave of immigration. So the first wave of immigration were Dutch and German merchants. The second wave of immigration comes from Jews fleeing the pogroms from Russia. And they ended up settling in the very poorest section of Glasgow alongside Irish and Italian immigrants. Kind of like the Lower East Side, right? All right. So they were Jews who were fleeing pogroms. What caused the pogroms? We're talking about the 1800s, late 1800s.
Well, there was one universal cause that caused pogroms, so I'll resort to that one because I don't really know the specific one you have in mind. But the universal cause in Europe that caused pogroms throughout history was Jews being blamed for killing of Christ. Wherever there was in Central Europe, maybe it was in Poland, but anyhow, a call to pogrom started with HEP, HEP, HEP. And HEP is an acronym for Hierosolima es perdida, which means Jerusalem was lost.
Yes, Ray. Your mother's brother was killed by the Cossacks. So, very bad. She was one of the men who would have to look out, and they would let to warn them that they were coming. Yeah, that sounds like a very dangerous job. And when she was running through the forest, they got her. Oh, my goodness. What caused the great migration from the great movement of Jews out of Russia and Eastern Europe in the late 1800s was the assassination of Tsar Alexander II in 1881. This began moves the Jews to try to go to Palestine, but it also to get anywhere out of Russia, and so some went to Scotland. So 1881 starts lots of movement for Jews out of Russia and Eastern Europe because they were blamed for the assassination of Tsar Alexander II. Now, previous to that, just previous to that, we're talking about 1881, just previous to that, Jews had been relegated to the Pale of Settlement, where the shtetls were. This is Fiddler on the Roof time. How did they get into the Pale of Settlement? Do we remember what the Pale of Settlement was? The corridor between Poland and Russia, that's correct. When Catherine the Great becomes Empress of Russia in the mid-1700s, she annexes the eastern part of Poland to Russia. When she does that, she has lots and lots of Jews in that annexed population. Why? Because many Jews during the 1400s had gone to Poland because the Polish nobility asked them to come and help them turn their agricultural economy into a mercantile economy. So there were lots and lots and lots of Jews in Poland. It's the same reason, clearly, why Hitler inherited a huge problem from his standpoint when Germany invades Poland. Because now all of a sudden he has Europe's largest population of Jews that he has just taken over in Poland, and now he has to figure out what to do with them. Remember that before Germany invades Poland, the primary solution for what Hitler felt was the Jewish problem was he was just going to make life so miserable for them they would all leave. And or he would send them all to the island of Madagascar. That didn't work out. And then when he annexes Poland, when Germany invades and takes over Poland, all of a sudden he has millions of Jews now. And so the previous ideas no longer worked. We can't get millions of Jews to just get up and leave. And that's when the final solution was conceived. Now we have all these Jews, what am I going to do? We have to get rid of them. Okay, so in a sense, Catherine the Great had the same problem from her standpoint. She annexes the eastern part of Poland, and now she has all these Jews. Nobody wants them in Russia, so she doesn't allow them to live in Russian territory. So she creates a separate territory, the eastern part of Poland, and she calls it it's called the Pale of Settlement. And all the Jews were packed into there. Other people were packed into there as well. It wasn't just Jews. Lots of other people were packed into there as well. But it was very poor, and there was disease rampant and everything. So these Jews were fleeing. And where did they go? Scotland. Okay. There are other places too, clearly. But one of the places that they went was Scotland. And they ended up going to the very poorest places in Glasgow because they were poor, uneducated Jews. The first cemetery comes up in 1888 in a city called Dundee, and in 1897, Glasgow had 6,500 Jews. All right. So we had a first wave of immigration from Dutch and German immigrants in the West who were wealthy and educated. We had a second huge wave of immigration from Eastern Europe and Russia of Jews who were poor and uneducated. Do you think that caused some problems in Scotland? Does that ring a bell to any of us here in this country? Germany, German Jews that came did not accept the next group of Jews that came. That's exactly right. German Jews who came to New York, especially in the early 1800s, were assimilated and wealthy. And they settled in New York mostly, also in the South, Savannah, and they established themselves as prominent in business and in other, in business mostly, businesses. Then came the huge wave of immigration from Eastern Europe and Russia after the pogroms of 1881, the very earliest in the 19th century, right? You had the huge wave of immigration through Ellis Island. Many of our ancestors came through there, mine did, and fleeing those pogroms and the anti-Semitism, and they settled in the Lower East Side of New York. Okay. Now, how did those wealthy German Jews feel about those poor, uneducated Jews who had just come over from Europe, Russia? They were embarrassed. Gary's correct. They were embarrassed by them. Oh, you people, you're giving us a terrible name. What? You believe in doing the, what? Are you kidding me? Remember that the Jews from Eastern Europe believed in folklore. They believed in superstitions. They believed in all kinds of things that the German Jews had classified as, backward, rural, poor, uneducated, bumbling, and they were very embarrassed by them. The German Jews were, they would walk, they had top hats, they had top coats, they were in banking, they were in finance, they had prominent positions, and then you had these people in babushkas and it was embarrassing to them. So we went through the exact same thing here at the turn of the century. Yes, Ray. I think I read a long time ago that they opened up charities for these poor Jews. Some German Jews did. They tried to help some of the new immigrant Jews from Eastern Europe. Again, they saw them as embarrassing, and they wanted to try to lift them up so that they wouldn't give the wealthy Jews a bad name. By the way, I'm not contagious anymore.
Okay.
I did a week on antibiotics and steroids.
So from what I understand, there were also significant religious differences between the two groups. One was more Orthodox and the other was more secular and Reformed.
That's 100% correct. The German Jews were reform or secular, and the Jews coming out of Eastern Europe were basically Orthodox. Yes, absolutely. And that caused a problem as well. Okay, so the Jews coming out, the Dutch and German Jews were called the Westjuden, the Western Jews. And the Ostjuden, the Eastern Jews, were Yiddish speakers, clearly. The West German, the Westjuden, they moved to the affluent areas in Glasgow, and they opened Garnet Hill Synagogue in 1879, and it is the oldest active synagogue in Scotland to this day. The Garnet Hill Synagogue. The Eastern Jews settled in the slums of Glasgow, which were called the Gorbals. And they opened South Portland Street Synagogue in 1901. That synagogue closed and was demolished in 1974, but it was for a long time. And these slums in Glasgow were very much like the shtetls. So, they fled. They fled the pogroms in Eastern Europe and Russia from the Pale of Settlement, and they went to Scotland, and they settled in a place that was just like the Pale of Settlement. In 1901, there were 9,000 Jews in Scotland. And by 1911, there were 12,000 Jews in Scotland. So in 1905, the United Kingdom passes the Aliens Act. And the Aliens Act was designed to control immigration and registration, basically to not allow Jews in. And so what it targeted was someone who was unable to support him or herself. They were deemed undesirable. They couldn't come in. They turned some away on medical grounds, people who were sick, people who had filed for asylum to come to Scotland were supposed to be exempted from this act, but in many cases they just ignored it. And it was designed to prevent the poor and criminals from entering the country and to deport those who slipped through. So clearly the objective was to control immigration from Eastern Europe. Did we have something similar here? Somebody tell me what it was? It's right up here. Right here. It's the Johnson-Reed Immigration Act of 1924. We had the exact same thing here. Ostensibly, it was to prevent immigration from Southeastern Asia, but it included Jews, and it was really designed to stop Jews from coming here. Chinese, yes, but actually primarily Jews. And it was one of the reasons why when World War II starts out, that Jews couldn't get here. We were closed off to them. Britain closes off immigration to Britain in 1939 with what were called the White Papers, because they didn't want to anger the Arab population that was in charge of Israel at the time, the Grand Mufti. And so, as we've talked about a number of times, when Kristallnacht comes up in 1938, there's no place for anybody to go. They can't get out anymore. The Exodus? Oh, the St. Louis. Yeah, the St. Louis, and was turned away. Yes, yes. So, so yes, the Johnson-Reed Immigration Act of 1924, and as we all know, our country was anti-Semitic. A lot of anti-Semitism here. In the city where I live, Burbank, even in the 1950s, they had signs on properties, no Jews, no blacks allowed. Where? Glendale too? Yeah. Yeah. That's absolutely. And the State Department was full of anti-Semites. Yes, this is all true. Yes, Cecil.
The Johnson-Reed Immigration Act, did that set up quotas for people?
Yes, did the Johnson-Reed Immigration Act set up quotas? Yes, it did, but it was very, very small. A very small number who could enter. I think it was 10,000, something, which at the time was like, there were millions who were trying to get here. 10,000 was like nothing. That's why a lot of Jews went to South America, Mexico. You're right, because there were a lot of places that were closed to them. And Cuba. There you go. Yes. So at the moment, Edinburgh has 2 synagogues, one Reform and one Orthodox synagogue. Glasgow has 6 synagogues. There are Reformed synagogues, Orthodox synagogues, and Chabad, clearly. Say again? Of course, Chabad. You know, Chabad does wonderful work. They really do. They do wonderful work. I can't say one negative thing about Chabad. They welcome anybody who comes to them and says, I want to be Jewish. Somebody who's, I don't know, maybe they eat bacon every morning and they've never done anything in their life that's Jewish and they know nothing about anything, Chabad welcomes them with open arms and says, "Come, we'll teach you." I can't fault them. Your granddaughter's a freshman in Georgia Tech. They have Hillel and Chabad. The outreach of Chabad. They have Shabbat. They do incredible work. They do incredible work. They do incredible work.
In Santo Domingo, there was a dictator, Rafael Leónidas Trujillo.
Susie, I can feel Susie's eyes.
In Santo Domingo, oh, thank you. In Santo Domingo, which is an island of the eastern part of Cuba, there was a dictator, Rafael Leónidas Trujillo, and he was like all dictators. I'm sorry? Well, yes, but in Cuba it's Santo Domingo, okay? But yes, you're correct, okay? Now, where was I? Yes. And he was a mean dictator, a criminal. Yet, when Jews were not, World War II, Jews were not allowed to enter the United States, Trujillo allowed Jews to come into Santo Domingo.
Very good. So Glasgow has 6 synagogues. There are 2 mikvaot, 2 mikvahs, obviously one in Glasgow and one in Edinburgh. And for a long time in Scotland, there has been a great deal of tolerance and acceptance and friendliness towards Jews. It has been a good place for Jews to live. Starting in 2019, one of the members of the Scottish Parliament did begin to express concerns about growing anti-Semitism, not only in Europe in general, but also in Scotland. I couldn't find any information on how things have changed in this last year, since October 7th and since Israel invaded Gaza. But I can only imagine that the situation is not as good there because it has deteriorated all over the world for Jews. So I am. If I find something, I'll let you know. But I imagine that it's probably still okay, but I bet it's not as okay as it used to be. Has anybody been to Scotland and visited? So tell us something. Did you visit any synagogues?
Unfortunately, we were on a tour of Scotland, and we got to Edinburgh and some of the other places, but we didn't have a chance to see any synagogues.
Okay. Anyone else see any Jewish places in Scotland? No? Jewish people. Okay. That's good. That's good. Yeah. Yes. 6,000 today, half of what it was a century ago. Yes. I wasn't able to find any information on where they. Yeah. Yep. All right, everybody. Have a beautiful week. And we're on next week, yes? Yes. Say again, Susie? 2 more weeks. Okay. Oh, thank you. I actually feel really pretty good, but.
Oh,
you
you've
been
been
there?
there?
No.
Well, you have to
Okay.
be there.
I was gonna
Culture.
invite you, I was gonna ask you to be our guide.
Oh, my goodness. Well, you have to give us a good
Yeah,
report
we
when
will.
you get back.
Yeah, well,
I don't think there are many Jews there.
I don't know. Anyway,
Okay.
thank you. Hello, hello. I'm sorry I'm late. I got stuck in the freeway. They closed off the 170 from the 5, and they're doing bridge repairs, so don't go on there, please. On the 170, coming south, you know, from the 118, if any of you plan to go to the North Valley, take some other freeway. They closed off the whole 170 up there. They're doing bridge repair. You can imagine thousands of us on the freeway stuck. Huh? No, they're doing bridge repair. You know, when the 5 and the 170 split coming from the north, forget it. I don't know how long. Do it. Oh, I'll leave it here. Drive, I can use it.
Okay, it's time to get your last cookies and your last coffees. Hi, Bridget. Good morning. Good morning, everybody at home. Up there. Ah, you're back in the areas of the world. Scotland. How many people here have been to Scotland? I really want to go to Scotland. I've never been to Scotland. It's cold and dreary. It is all the time? It must have been a number of years ago, right? I figured if you made a fuel stop somewhere, it was probably a long time ago. So, yeah. I've watched movies like that. Yeah. Good morning, everybody. It's always very nice to be here. I was just in the administration office, and Candace, who works in the administration office, I was walking out the door from there, and she said, "Have fun." And I said, "I always have fun when I get to teach with MID." So I hope you'll have fun too. So we're going to start by saying the blessing for learning. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So today's immersion in Torah is going to be a look at ethics with regard to the environment, with regard to ecology. And so it's a little bit different today because we're going to lead in to having this discussion by taking a look at how Jewish texts deal with the idea of human beings and nature. And then we'll move into some texts that talk about what our obligations are. Some of them you may have heard and some that you haven't. So I'm going to distribute this to you. And is today the last day of classes? No? We have 2 more weeks. That's what I thought, and then I heard somebody say that MID wasn't on. Okay. We're on. Everybody here and everybody at home, we are on. Okay, so let me distribute these. Thank you, Bridget, one of my major distributors. And let's see, who else can distribute? We got it. Don't worry. I'll get you to volunteer. Okay. So I prepared a slew of different things. Not all of them we're going to do, but if you decide to take it home, then you'll have it with you when you take a look at it again. So do you see the first page where it says Judaism and the environment? So what I'd like to do is I'd like to begin with the first paragraph with Abraham Joshua Heschel, and then go down to the bottom of the page where it says Rashi, the very bottom, and then we'll pop back up. So, doesn't it, down at the bottom, Rashi on Deuteronomy? Oh, maybe it's, oh, you know what, on your document, it's the next page, because I made the words bigger. I made the font bigger, so that's why you have that. So, okay, I'm going to share Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel and Rashi on Deuteronomy, and then what we're going to do is we're going to see if we can explain it together through taking a look at it. So this is Abraham Joshua Heschel, of course, the beloved Jewish educator and rabbi. He was the person who marched in all of the marches that had to do with racial justice and injustice. And he was a conservative rabbi, very, very well beloved. Rabbi Wise did too. Adad Ariel's rabbi was right there with him. So thank you, Ernie. From a Jewish perspective, the earth is a person's sister rather than his mother. Because what do people say about earth? Mother Earth. So Heschel says the earth is a person's sister. Man and earth are equally creations of God. To think of God, man must hear the world. Man is not alone in celebrating God. To praise him is to join all things in their song to him. So let's do Rashi, who comes a little bit in time before Abraham Joshua Heschel in the 12th century of the Common Era. And here's what Rashi says: is man a tree of the field? Here, the word ki, because ki is the Hebrew word, ki ha'adam eitz hasadeh, it means perhaps a tree of the field is human and should be included in the proscription of the town before you and should suffer with hunger and thirst just like human inhabitants of the city. Why would you destroy it? Meaning a tree. We're going to do the text later on about war and trees that I think that you probably have seen before. However, we've got two really interesting things being said. So what are these guys saying about the value of nature, meaning a tree, and the value of a human?
That they have something in common, that they're similar, and should be respected for that.
So anybody else? So it's a little weird, isn't it? It's a little weird because we know from Jewish tradition that human beings are second only to God. I know that we have angels that serve God, but I think I've said before that in the Torah and in texts after that, when you're talking about angels, you're talking about beings that serve God that do not have any free will, meaning God tells them what to do and they do it. But human beings have free will. So that makes us second to the other major being who thinks and decides and does all those kinds of things. So, yeah. Looks like you have a question.
Well, maybe more of a comment, because if man has free will, then he's above a tree, because a tree doesn't have free will.
So that's why I'm suggesting that they are making a comment that leads us to something else. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. A tree obviously doesn't have free will. However, they are making a statement about how the world functions. From the perspective of God, this earth functions because human beings live on it, are in covenant with God, and it's up to us to take care of the world. If there were no trees, both of these people are trying to say. If there were no trees, there really would not be a very strong possibility that we could continue to live. Exactly. So when Heschel says they are siblings, it's because God, for 6 out of 7 days, seventh day we ceased from work and rested. So 5 out of 6 days, we're not making human beings in the creation, are we? We're making fish in the sea, we're making all the growing things, we're making not we, God. The Torah is making those things. That's what it is in Genesis. So before we even get to people, we have to have an ecosystem that God has created, right? That's what we have when we get to the day of creation of man and woman. We already have an ecosystem. We have the stars and the moon and the planets in the sky. It is no longer just a mishmash of things. It is now a real world. And so what these two people are saying is that trees or growing things and human beings have to live symbiotically. We have to be together. We are siblings in the experience of the existence of the world. Does that make any more sense? So from the very, very beginning of time, of human time, God is telling us, be careful with the things around you. So now we can move on with the other text, okay? Here's the difference. This is a great paragraph by a woman, Ellen Bernstein. I have no idea who she is, but could somebody read Ecology and the Jewish Spirit, where nature and sacred meet?
It's on the first page.
Where's that?
First page.
Right under Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. Do you see her?
Yeah, Ellen Bernstein, Ecology and the Jewish Spirit, where nature and the sacred meet. Oh, sorry. Oh, I was just reading the title. I will. Okay, sure. Moderns too often pose the wrong questions to religion. They ask what Judaism says about the environmental crisis and nature. Rather, Judaism's ecological message emerges when we observe what is sacred in Judaism. How are we to treat what is holy? And what is humanity's place amid the holiness? The Jewish understanding that the earth belongs to God attests to the fact that the earth and everything in it is holy. And this concept of holiness, Kedusha, is the beginning of a unique Jewish environmental ethic.
Okay, that was ausgezeichnet, yes. That was perfect. Susie, I haven't used that word in forever. Okay, so what do we have here? Why, from the beginning of our biblical experience and all the way through the thousands of years of Jewish life, why do we care about this? What does this say? We shouldn't be asked a simple question like, what does your religion believe about environmentalism? She's saying something different. She's saying we start with something different. What's the something different that we start with? Holy. Yes. Holy. Holiness. Right? We have a creator who created this world, opened up opportunities for human beings. So when we take a look at this from a religious perspective, we look at this as not only our world, but God's world. And when it's God's world, there's an element of holiness and respect for God that happens when we as human beings live ethically on all sorts of levels, but today live ethically with regard to the other things that God has created. Does that all make sense? So she's saying we don't just talk about it in terms of like climate change and have it be like just simply a scientific discussion. This is a holiness discussion. How do we take care of what God has given us, right? Okay, so now let's move on a little bit, and we'll go down to Deuteronomy 20:19 to 20, which means skipping this little Genesis thing. Do you see that? Deuteronomy 20:19 through 20, it's right above the Rashi that we read earlier. Got it? Okay. Does somebody want to read this? Come on down. You'll have to tell me the page numbers. I was trying to be polite to make it a bigger. Yeah, what happened to our other mic? Okay. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, this is in the book of Deuteronomy, the 5th book of the Torah. Go ahead.
When thou shalt besiege a city a long time, in making war against it to take it, thou shalt not destroy the trees thereof by wielding an axe against them. For thou mayest eat of them, but thou shalt not cut them down. For is the tree of the field man? Sorry. That it should be besieged of thee? Only the trees of which thou knowest that they are not trees for food, them thou mayest destroy and cut down, that thou mayest build bulwarks against the city that maketh war with thee until it fall.
Okay. Anybody got any comments about this? Go ahead, Cecil.
This is a very interesting statement. You see, in times past, cities were walled, and attacking armies would ram the gates. And to ram the gates, they used to have some implements. And what they're telling you here is, don't cut the trees to ram the gates. Let the trees stay. And so that's just a comment on the warfare of the times.
So it does have two different kinds of trees, right? One kind of tree is the tree with fruits on it. So those trees that have fruits on them, this is only partially an ecological conversation, but I'll tell you why it becomes that. Because it's saying you need the food to eat. Why besiege a tree that's useful that you might need? And why? Is the tree fighting the war? The tree's not fighting the war. So you try to save the trees. Now, let me come up to the current time in which we live. What do we have? What organization do we have in Israel that is about trees? Jewish National Fund, which has planted trees since the establishment of the state. So the trees are planted for two different reasons. And part of it is an ecological reason, because the land was sand and different kinds of muddy patches when there was water. Yes.
The Turks were building their railroad. They got rid of all the trees in Israel to build their railroad.
The Turks were building a railroad when they ran that area through what became Israel. They took down all the trees. So because of the weather, because of the dirt and sand, because of the fact that somebody else tore down whatever trees there were, the Jewish National Funds was trying to create an ecosystem for Israel that now is really, really, really strong. There are trees all over the place. However, there is another reason, human reason, why they didn't want to, why they wanted to plant all those trees, and why we don't want to cut down trees. Anybody know what that is?
I mean, trees are good for a lot of reasons. They're good for shade, and they're good for keeping the wind and, yeah, and oxygen and.
All that is true.
I think we learned this by scientific investigation that trees are important to turn carbon dioxide into oxygen. And there's a relationship with humans because we breathe out carbon dioxide, animals. So there's, there's a system in place between animals and us. And the animals breathe out carbon dioxide, which trees need to convert to oxygen.
Didn't God do a good job? Okay, the other reason that trees, do you want to try this? Then can you please come here? Oh, you can't get up? All right, we'll only make you get up once.
Yes, I learned this actually when I went to Hawaii. They had the island of Kona was barren, and a person who owned the land at that time planted pine trees across the top of the mountain. And since he planted the pine trees on top of the mountain, it has always rained, and they have plenty of water.
Okay, all of those are great reasons and major reasons why all of this tree planting has happened in Israel. But the other reason is that trees, when they grow, protect things from being seen. Nope. So if there is what's going on now, which is a war, it's much harder for an enemy to see where you are located if you have trees, if there are a number of trees. So they have planted in areas for ecological reasons, hundreds of thousands of trees, but they have also planted in areas that are between them and other places and other people to make sure that there is protection in that way. Pardon? As a camouflage. So that's what we've got for that. Yes. Say that again. When
Yes.
you were in Israel.
When we were in Israel, they had us plant trees. And, yeah, yeah. But it was really such a wonderful sensation. And I planted one for each of my children, for my mother, my dad, whoever was home. And it was just a wonderful feeling to do that.
How do they deal with the water issue? Because trees need water.
I don't know the answer to that question. I know that, the state of California makes use of Israel's drip irrigation systems, which they have put into place everywhere in Israel. So I'm imagining that they have a really good way of conserving water, but also helping those drip irrigation. Okay, so let's go to Deuteronomy 30:19. It's under a top of a page that has Genesis 1:26. It's the next one. Oh, sorry. I can't say top of the page. Deuteronomy 30:19. It is two texts down from Rashi. Okay. Try to do a good deed and it. Deuteronomy 30:19. Got it? Okay. I call heaven and earth to witness against you this day that I've set before you life and death, the blessing and the curse. Therefore choose life that you may live and your offspring. The reason that this text is in here is because choosing life we sometimes look at quite narrowly. Like, okay, we want to stay alive, we want to use the right medicine, we want to stay as healthy as possible, we would like to we'd like to have fulfilling lives. But also, choose life means taking care of what environment is around you. Make sense? Because in order to live a life that is healthy and long and happy, you need to have the whole creation around you. So now we're going to go only one down with Psalms 115:16. Got that? Okay. So I'd like for somebody to read that one and Ecclesiastes that's right under that, and I'm giving it to you, Susie Wozniak. Thank you. Psalms and Ecclesiastes.
The heavens are the heavens of the Lord, but the earth hath he given to the children of men. One generation goes, and another generation comes, and the earth remains forever. Out.
Okay. So these are not in the Torah. These are in the writings that we have, because we have Torah and we have prophets and we have writings. So that's where they are. So the earth God has given to us. And that means what? We have to take care of it. And then we're being told in Ecclesiastes, because Ecclesiastes is all about taking a look at life and the flow of life. One generation goes and another generation comes, and yet if we do the right thing, if we do what God wants us to do to take care of the earth, that's going to be here for generations and generations to come. So the things that our people are saying in our current society, or have been saying for quite a while, a number of generations, for sure, is something that we have had within our set of responsibilities for thousands of years. And so there are different ways of dealing with that. So we're going to find out what those different ways are as we look at the Babylonian Talmud. Same page.
Yeah, but no, on this one, it's the next page.
Okay. Yeah, does the heading. Go ahead. Up you go.
Okay, just a moment.
Turn around.
Turn around, you always have to remind me. Okay. Rob Judah said in the name of Samuel, to enjoy anything of this world without a blessing is like making personal use of things consecrated to heaven, since it says the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. Okay, Rabbi Nina Ben Papa said, to enjoy this world without a blessing is like robbing the Holy One, blessed be he, and the community of Israel.
Okay, I have a big question for you, and it's something that we talked about with regard to food, and we talked about with regard to kashrut, so maybe that will put your antenna up. Why is it that it is critically important for us to say a blessing when we are faced with these kinds of things in the world? So when you have an experience of seeing a particular tree, or you have an experience of eating fruit from something for the first time that is grown in your backyard, why is it that we are supposed to look at our environmental responsibilities with saying a blessing whenever we encounter these things? Saying a blessing means saying thank you, God. Right. So why must we do that? Yes, Zisel.
Because all the enumerated blessings are from God.
Because all the blessings are from God. So let me ask you a question. I mean, this is really also about ethics. I promise you that this is something that we should be thinking about, because it's harder to say an ethical response to ecology, to taking care of things. But we have guidelines for that. So when I told you about the fact that I keep kosher, I said, in my cabinets, when I have one cabinet for meat and one cabinet for dairy, when I go to get those plates, I have to think about what I have gotten, what they're being eaten with, and what that does is it expands my sense of awareness and also gratitude. So you might have in your life many ways to do that. But what's being said here in this text is that it's not just about not cutting down the tree. It's about opening up yourselves to recognizing how blessed you are when you can walk out on a sunny or a cloudy or a foggy day or whatever and experience what you have been given. So it harkens back to the first paragraph that we did, that was the woman writing, but this isn't just about doing this stuff. It's about internalizing the blessing and the gratitude in it. Does that make sense to you? I'll try to repeat you, so go slow. It feels like okay, it's like being given a gift, and when you're given a gift, you're supposed to say thank you. So I know that all of us, or probably most of us, have traveled somewhere or gone somewhere where we've seen beautiful water, or we've seen a beautiful mountain, or we've walked around and we've seen lovely flowers. Occasionally, we might stand there and say, wow. Right? Wow can be a blessing. I know we have actual blessings in Judaism for these things. However, wow can be a blessing if it makes you stop and have a sense of gratitude for what you've been given. But the fact is, we don't do that every day at all. So I'd like to move on. Are you? Tell your two little stories, because we care about people here.
Okay. First one is, before I say these two stories, the practice of saying brachas infuses your life with gratitude, but an awareness of that you don't take things for granted. So, I'm sorry. On a trip to Yosemite, I went with 3 other friends of mine, and we came through the tunnel that you come into Yosemite, and this beautiful expanse is there, and simultaneous 4 of us said, "Oh my God!" But the yes, oh my God. I forgot the other story. Oh well.
Thank you. All right. So, these things can be good or when my children were little, whenever they would get something new, I would have them say Shehechianu, which is the Hebrew prayer for acquiring things that are new and to be given this wonderful thing that that God has allowed you to have. And they got really annoyed about it when they started to be teenagers, which people actually do. But now, I think that it sometimes it comes back a little bit. When I personally, when I'm driving and I see a rainbow or beautiful pink clouds, I will say how amazing you are, God. I do a little prayer in Hebrew that's like 5 words. But you could do it any way you want. What these texts are saying is don't take things for granted. So now we're going to read Honi. Ernie, do you want to read one? Do you see Ta'anit 23a right there? Yes.
One day, Honi was walking along the way, and he saw a man who was going to plant a carob tree. He said to him, "How many years until it will bear fruit?" He answered, 70 years. He asked, "Is it so clear to you that you will be alive in 70 years?" He answered, "I found this world complete with carob trees that my ancestors planted. So too I will plant some for my children." Honi sat to rest and slept for 70 years. He saw the same man collecting carobs. He said, "Are you the one who planted this?" He answered, "I am my son's son." I am his son's son. Honi said, "I must have slept for 70 years.
Yeah, you know the Rip Van Winkle story? Yeah. The Rip Van Winkle story actually comes from the Talmud. You might have heard this literally, really. It comes from the Talmud because of this Honi story, which is exactly the precursor to the Rip Van Winkle story that you might have heard. So, but that's not the real issue here, even though it's talking about the fact that he slept for 70 years. It's a very interesting story if you've never studied or looked at it. But what did this man who planted the carob tree do? Did he plant it for himself? He didn't plant it for himself. He understood that for all of these things to remain on earth and have them be useful, that he would have to plant that even if he wouldn't see it. So then you learn that it's not just his son, but his grandson who actually is there tending to the tree. So I think that, hold on. I think that sometimes people have a viewpoint that all of these things that they're going to do, they are doing for themselves. But what did he say about why he was planting the tree? Right. When he came there and found them, somebody planted it for him, and he wanted to make sure that that happened for them. So I think that so far you probably have a really lovely understanding of how old ecological concerns are on the part of our tradition. Yes?
Reminds me of the story about the pioneers who built this synagogue 75 years ago, that we have the joy today.
To be here.
Right.
Yeah, that's really wonderful, because this can happen on all sorts of levels in life if we take the time and the concern to think ahead and know that we need to plan and do things that will help others even if we don't get the benefit from them. So now we're going to go to Rashi. Rashi, the famous commentator, he also in the 12th century of the Common Era, actually earlier. Rav Zutra says, do you see that? One who covers an oil lamp or uncovers a naphtha lamp has violated Baal Tashchit, the Torah's prohibition on wasteful or pointless destruction of property or resources. So, Rashi says, doing either of these things causes the oil or naphtha to burn faster and therefore uses up more fuel than is necessary to achieve your purpose, keeping the lights on. It wastes energy, and according to Rav Zutra, is Baal Tashchit. So Baal Tashchit in Hebrew is literally an ancient idea of making use of things that you overuse, that you really don't need, but that you have chosen to do without thinking about what the consequences of that might be. So here we're talking about something that comes out of the Talmud that is discussed by one of our great teachers in Jewish life, saying what? Don't be wasteful, right? And also use things that you know can be used more, pardon? Efficiently. Don't leave the water running in the sink when you're in the kitchen. So, okay. Last one on this page. Rosalie, will you come up and read this one? Avot de Rabbi Natan. That's another very early text.
I'll read slowly.
Do you see it?
Yeah, it's at the bottom. It says Rabbi Nachum of Bratslav, Prayer for Nature. People see that? Okay.
This one.
Yeah, down here. Oh, that's another one. Wait a minute.
Here.
Oh, you have a different page.
I do, I know. That's what
Okay.
everybody's been telling me.
I'll vote the Rabbi Natan 31. People see that? Okay, Rabbi Yohanan ben Zakkai used to say, if you have a sapling in your hand and they tell you the Messiah is coming, first plant the sapling and then go to greet him. So the tree is more important than the Messiah.
If, okay, it's more important than greeting the Messiah is what Rosalie said. Anybody else have any other takes on this?
When he wrote it, maybe after Shabbatai Tzvi, when everybody was ready for the Messiah and people were selling their property and getting ready for the Messiah, and it was a false Messiah.
Okay. Oh, in that particular case it was, yes. So, anybody else? What she was talking about is that there was a time in Jewish history when a whole bunch of people decided that there was a messianic force that was coming, a Messiah, and it didn't really happen. But they prepared everything for it, and when they prepared everything for it, selling their property, changing everything, it didn't happen. I'm not sure that that is exactly what this is taking a look at. If the Messianic age comes, And does that mean that human beings will cease to exist? So in Jewish tradition, it's not necessarily that. In other religious traditions, it's potentially possible that that people will transfer to a different realm. But in our tradition, when the messianic era comes, when the person who's the Messiah comes, who is in Judaism a person, like a person, and brings peace and well-being to everybody who is in the world, then you're not going anywhere, right? You're still going to be alive in a better world. So if you're going to be alive in a better world and you're waiting for the Messiah to come, does that mean that you don't still have the obligation to plant that tree? And what this text tells you is you still have the obligation to plant that tree, because there may well still be generations after you, maybe living a better life. Anyway, one could say, if the Messiah is coming and you get to meet the Messiah, I don't think the Messiah is going to skip town that quickly. So you can finish. Planting your sapling that is still needed. Okay. What time is it?
It's a quarter of. You still have time. Good. Yeah, the question I have deals with war. And it's just that we haven't, as human beings, we haven't progressed to the point where we don't fight wars. And there's a lot of destruction in wars. And I think people involved in war, other than the Jewish nation, are aggressors usually. And so the question is, how do you really deal with that in terms of if you are engaged in war and try to keep from destroying nature? What is the Jewish perspective on that?
There actually is I have friends who just came back to the United States after being in the army in Israel for their second time. And they actually do have rules about that you can only take down things that are absolutely dangerous to you. You cannot just in a wholesale fashion take down trees or even buildings. The number of buildings that they have been taking down have been really structured very clearly. So they said, you just don't do anything that isn't absolutely necessary. So I don't know what it is in other countries. So I don't know. So I'm sorry. I really want to make sure that we go through things. So we're not going to read Rabbi Nachman of Bratislav's Prayer for Nature, but I would suggest you take it home and read it. We are now at Kohelet Rabbah. Do you know that? That's a midrash, meaning a story that describes biblical texts. Ready? Okay. Look at God's work. For who can straighten what God has twisted? That comes from Ecclesiastes. When the Blessed Holy One created the first human, he took him and led him round the trees of the Garden of Eden and said to him, "Look at my works, how beautiful and praiseworthy they are. And all that I have created, it was for you that I created it. Pay attention that you do not corrupt and destroy my world. If you corrupt it, there is no one to repair it after you." This is quite an ancient text, and it also comes from God leading Adam around Eden and pointing out these things to him. Do you have any comments about that? It's a beautiful text. And can you imagine that that's written biblically for the very first human being that ever existed, at least according to biblical text? So from the very beginning, we're being told, like, this is what you have to do to be an ethical, straight-up, caring person. Any comments on that? Or then we'll move on to Leviticus. This is, yes?
I grew up in communist Czechoslovakia. Closer? Okay. And as an atheist. Everybody was an atheist. I was an atheist. And atheist, yes. And when at a certain age, when I was looking at the nature, the trees and mountains and blue skies and everything, how beautiful it was, I was thinking, if the world is only by Darwin ideas developing it on its own, why there is all that beauty? And that led me eventually to, yeah.
That's very lovely. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. This is something that we're responsible for and is still upheld in Eretz Yisrael, in the land of Israel, which is if you plant, with regard to planting new fruits. When you enter the land and plant any tree for food, you shall regard its fruit as forbidden. 3 years it shall be forbidden for you, not to be eaten. In the 4th year, all its fruit can be set aside for jubilation, to be offered to God. And nowadays they offer it to people who are poor. And only in the 5th year may you use its fruit, that its yield to you may be increased. So I found this thing from 2016 from the Huffington Post. So we are going from biblical to 2016. Don Sebastian was on a roll trying to explain to the large group gathered at his tree nursery business the depth of his transformation of growing fruit trees. The reason for this transformation were not workshops about reforestation, nor farmer manuals, nor experts from other countries paying farmers to plant trees. Rather, it was a 5-year relationship between Don Sebastian's family and the Guatemalan technicians from the Alliance for International Reforestation. They use a 5-year model, recognizing that it takes time to see the benefits of specific trees. So, we have a biblical responsibility in the Torah to not just pick fruits for our own, because we feel like it, for our own use when the tree is too young, because biblically they already understood that in order to harvest the most, the best, and to keep the tree in good shape, you had to wait. So now this organization is just doing that, saying, oh, we discovered that you should wait 5 years to use any of the fruit of these trees. And what I wanted to yell when I read that is, look in the book. It's already there. Okay. We are almost done. Cecil, will you read Sefer HaChinuch and Abraham Isaac Cook? Here, you need this.
bottom of the same
Yeah, I
page.
got it.
The bottom of the
Yeah, I
page
got
you've
it.
been on.
Righteous people. I'm sorry? No, I don't need it back. Yes, you do. Okay, all right. Sorry about that. May I? Thank you, Rabbi. Okay, I'm so sorry. Righteous people will not destroy even a mustard seed in the world, and they are distressed at every ruination and spoilage they see. And if they are able to do anything, any rescuing, they will save anything from destruction with all their power.
Another ancient text, followed by a very prominent rabbi, Abraham Isaac Cook. He served as the chief rabbi in Israel, modern-day Israel. One day, Rav Kook was walking in the fields with a student when his student carelessly plucked a leaf off a branch. Visibly shaken by this act, Rav Kook turned to his companion and said gently, "Believe me when I tell you, I never simply pluck a leaf or a blade of grass or any living thing unless I have to. Every part of the vegetable world is singing a song and breathing forth a secret of the divine mystery of creation." For the first time, the young student understood the meaning of showing compassion to all things. And that's where we'll stop for today. I hope this was interesting to you. I'm always hoping. So if you want to keep it, please do. If you don't want to keep it, please don't. Sure. Yeah.
When you say the blessing for the prayer, like Baruch Atah, I know up until Baruch Atah, I don't know the end. Can I have a...
Sure. You mean for the learning?
Yeah.
Of course, I'll be happy to. Yeah.
Because I only know what you know when you say about the candles.
Okay.
And that's new.
I will absolutely make that for you.
And true. Where for my baby?
I was, when we were talking about the siege, that normally when armies go surround a city in a siege, they cut off the food of the inhabitants.
That's true.
And I'm struck by our standard of morality is that you don't do that at all. You got to save it. Yeah, that's about it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was a beautiful recollection. Thank you. Have a great week, everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. So Rabbi, Gary and I are going to Guatemala for a few weeks, so we'll be
That's
gone.
great.
We won't be here. Did you like my newsletter?
I thought it was amazing.
With all those pictures, it'll be.
We'll take pictures tonight.
Yeah, do that, and then for the follow-up newsletter, then I can use some
When
of
are
those
you
photos.
leaving?
Tomorrow morning at 4 a.m.
Wow.
Oh well. That's how
Have
it
you
goes.
been there?
No, our daughter's been there. And she said it's lovely. Actually, I think Gary was there years and years ago. When he went to South America, he went to Central America. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you for what you added. Thank you.
Oh, it reminded me, it's just, you know, I don't get it.
Have a safe, wonderful trip.
oh, thank you. Yeah, Guatemala.